Prices at the pump are no doubt on the minds of many Americans, some of whom have had to find other ways to get where they're going because they just can't afford to pay what it costs to fill up. Now, little has been done to address the issue in Washington, but Republican Congressman Peter Roskam says it's not for lack of trying on his party's part. He blames the Democrats, claiming since they took control of Congress, gas prices have shot up 76%. This week, Roskam filed a petition to force a vote on an energy bill that he says would not only lower fuel prices, but also make America energy independent. Congressman Peter Roskam joins us this morning. Thank you very much for coming in, Congressman.
Thank you, Dane.
If you could explain to us how this so-called Vision Act would actually work and how it would lower prices and increase production.
Well, in a nutshell, what it does is it says what we've got to do is replace 9 million barrels of oil that we import a day, every day.
Only 9 million we import?
Well, from hostile regimes,
about
in
the
other
Middle
words.
East,
That's right. I'm not talking about Canada, and I'm not talking about Mexico or American territories. But it's 9 million barrels a day that we've got to replace. And you can actually do this once you start to do the math. Part of it is in the legislation that I've proposed, along with Congressman Shimkus, is in the form of increased production, both at Anwar and the Outer Continental Shelf.
Let me stop you there.
All right, but let's
that's
get beyond
usually
production
where it
as well.
stops, okay? When you start talking about drilling in Anwar, and more importantly, I think, to many people, when you start talking about offshore drilling, off Florida and various other parts of the country, you run into an absolute roadblock. People simply don't believe that we have to do that to wean ourselves from foreign energy.
Well, I think the folks in my district believe that we've got to do it. And if you look, if
they
Bill
obviously
Clinton
don't own property in Florida then.
Well, I even have talked to Florida representatives who represent coastal districts who in 2006, their constituents were 70-30 against offshore drilling. Today, it's flipped, 70-30 in favor of offshore drilling. But the larger point is you've got to pursue domestic production in the short run. You've got to pursue, we've got 250 years of coal energy in this country. In southern Illinois, in particular, more British thermal units of energy in coal than in all of the Saudi oil fields, and yet we don't pursue the clean coal technology that we should.
Why?
So, coal has been demonized, and it's been characterized as something that is bad, and burning high sulfur coal is bad. But we've got to pursue, the projects like Future Gen that got tubed in the past couple of months, which was just terribly unfortunate. But moving forward, you got to also cast, I think, a larger vision, and that is literally creating a prize for a new aviation fuel, creating a prize for a new type of vehicle that we can move forward with.
Why hasn't some of this stuff been done already, specifically on creating incentives to provide new energy sources?
There's been, listen, Washington gets so jammed up in donkeys and elephants. The discharge petition that I filed the other day that you referenced actually is a discharge petition in favor of a Democrat's bill. It's a good idea, and I said this is ridiculous that this bill is not being brought to the floor for a vote. I don't care if it's a Republican idea. I don't care if it's a Democrat idea. I want to move forward towards energy independence.
But perhaps to get to those ideas, Peter, we have to open it up to everybody along our economic spectrum and not simply to energy companies. And what we see is that the oil companies are the ones leading the charge now on alternative energy because they seem determined to remain forever in the energy business. And as long as they are, they will determine the pace of change, not the American public and not the Congress.
I think that that's true. I think that anybody that's in the marketplace at the beginning has a strategic disadvantage. But I'll tell you, my younger sister lives in southwestern Pennsylvania, for example, and she recently told me that in her courthouse in their town, there's people all over the place. What are they doing? They're looking for the tracts of land where there's potential energy, because at $150 a barrel, all of a sudden the dynamic changes. What I want to make sure happens is that we don't leave this pivotal time in our public life and squander this opportunity to bring a whole host of people together. This is where the political left and the political right should be able to come together and say, you know what, regardless of what it is that is motivating you, we all should agree that we should be energy independent, and we can absolutely do this.
And you have the Democrats attacking you this time around, trying to wed you to President Bush as being a dependable partner of his and always taking care of large oil corporations. And I think a radio commercial I heard referred to it as the Grand Oil Party, and a voice impersonating the president, snickering and acting as though you were in on this energy conspiracy. Is that what this legislation is in response to, Peter?
Well, the legislation was contemplated far in advance of a radio ad, and I think the radio ad is sort of symptomatic of a House majority in Washington that is absolutely panicky. You know, Speaker Pelosi, when she campaigned as the minority leader in 2006, said that she had a plan to bring down gas prices. Well, there's no plan to bring down gas prices. It sounds like Richard Nixon's secret plan to end the war. There's no plan. And now that gas is knocking at $4.50 a gallon, you have constituencies all of a sudden that say, hey, I'm tired of this government by bumper sticker. I want to move forward, and I want to pursue a whole host of things.
Looking at it, though, in crass political terms, what incentive does a Democratic Congress at this point in time have to move energetically on this issue when they can simply wait until after the presidential election and get a sweeping change in the first 100 days?
Well, it depends on what your theory is of the electorate. My theory is that this is a pivotal issue and that Republicans have been out in front actually in terms of production and a willingness to be engaged in a whole host of things and not simply production alone. I call for a conservation effort. I call for anti-idling technology, some of the long-term R&D initiatives that should bring everybody together. But I think that there's some Democrats that I have personally been in conversation with that are terribly frustrated.
But clearly this is going to be
inaction.
A major campaign issue.
That's
in November, right?
Because that's right.
Everyone's going to try to make somebody wear the oil problem.
That's right.
What about the speculators? Are they part of the problem?
Well, I recently received an email, and there was a communication from all of the airline presidents that sent out a mass email yesterday to all of their customers saying that speculation is part of the problem. I voted in favor of legislation.
The Saudis say speculation is part of the problem.
Yeah, so let's put it on the table. But if we allow just simply a conversation about speculation to dominate the entire solution, we're forgetting the fundamental law of supply and demand. It is supply and demand that is driving this ultimately. And we're competing for energy resources in ways that we never did. 10 years ago, China and India are now ascendant in ways that we never contemplated. So what we've got to do is make sure that we're doing a whole host of things and not leaving anything on the table.
How would you assess President Bush and the White House's performance on the energy issue?
Well, I think they've been slow to act, particularly as it relates to the offshore drilling question. You know, the president has said he will lift the executive branch moratorium when Congress acts. And my attitude is, no. Show leadership. Lift the moratorium, put the pressure on Congress to do the same.
And Peter, I think in much of the public perception around this problem, there is the idea that the Bush administration is wedded at the hip to the oil industry. How does the Republican Party wean itself from that idea?
Well, you put forth ultimately holistic approaches that the oil industry may or may not like, but that are very competitive. You know, I represent a constituency that's just a common sense group of folks on balance, and they get the supply and demand piece, but they also understand that if we fall into the same old habit of just going back to oil, you don't drill your way out of this in the long run. In the long run, we're going to be transforming into a different type of energy economy, and I think the majority that I represent want to be a part of that.
Peter, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Get you back before the election. Appreciate it.